In the quiet corners of Ridgewood High, a boy named Noah learned early that silence could be both a shield and a prison. Born deaf, he had spent most of his life navigating a world that moved too fast, too loud, too careless to notice the quiet souls left behind. His parents had always told him he could do anything, except hear. But in a school where difference was mocked before it was understood, that one limitation became the only thing anyone saw. Each morning, Noah entered the crowded halls where laughter came like waves crashing around him. Sounds he could not hear but could always feel. The vibrations of slamming lockers, the ripples of conversation that never reached his ears, the quick glances from other students that turned into whispers and snickers. He learned to read lips to survive, though sometimes he wished he hadn't. Because the words he caught were never kind. The students didn't call him by his name. They called him mute, robot, or worse. Some would pretend to use sign language just to mock him, waving their hands in nonsense gestures that made others laugh. A few teachers tried to intervene, but their sympathy only made it worse. Pity, he realized, could sting more than cruelty. Noah's world became smaller each day. The cafeteria was a minefield of silent humiliation. Group projects turned into exercises in invisibility. Whenever a teacher asked for volunteers to present, he kept his eyes down, pretending to be busy. The fear wasn't of speaking. He couldn't. But of being seen, being reminded once again that no matter how hard he tried, he would always be different. But deep inside that silence burned something else, a quiet defiance, a stubborn will that refused to surrender. He loved books, especially those that told stories of people who overcame impossible odds. And in the solitude of the school library, his only sanctuary, he found his voice in written words. His essays carried emotion so powerful that teachers often wondered how a boy who never spoke could write with such thunder. Then came the day that would mark the beginning of his long transformation, the day he transferred into the senior communication class. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The class was about public speaking and leadership, led by Mr. Simmons, a teacher known for his strictness and reputation for producing top students. It was also the class where the school's popular students, athletes, cheerleaders, and the social elite ruled the room. Noah didn't want to take the class. It wasn't his choice, it was a scheduling error that the office refused to fix. When he walked in on the first day, the laughter started almost immediately. Someone joked about the mute kid taking speech class. Another asked if he planned to write his speech in sign language. Mr. Simmons, stern and distracted, told them to settle down but didn't look at Noah twice. To him, Noah was just another student, one who wouldn't last long. The first assignment was to write a short speech introducing themselves. Noah stared at the blank paper for a long time that night. He didn't know what to say, or how to say it. But then he remembered something his mother had once told him. Your silence isn't empty. It's full of things people haven't learned to listen to yet. So, he wrote about silence, about how the world was built for noise, about how people measured worth in sound and overlooked those who couldn't shout to be heard. It wasn't angry. It was honest. When he handed it in, Mr. Simmons read it twice, quietly stunned. But he said nothing, only gave a slow nod that meant more to Noah than words ever could. Still, the bullies didn't stop. In fact, the attention only made it worse. The ringleader, a senior named Chase, saw Noah's intelligence as a threat to his easy dominance. Chase was everything Noah wasn't: loud, confident, adored. He led the mockery with a charisma that made cruelty look like comedy. Noah became the punchline of the week. One afternoon, in front of half the class, Chase pulled Noah's hearing aids from his ears and dropped them on the floor, pretending to help fix the volume. The laughter that followed was explosive. Noah's hands shook as he picked them up, the world around him fading into a blur of motion and humiliation. For a moment, he thought of walking out and never coming back. But that night, instead of retreating, he stayed up late working on something that would speak for him when he couldn't. It was a project for the class, but also something more. A statement. A declaration. Weeks passed, and Noah slowly began to turn his pain into progress. His writing grew sharper, his confidence in silent expression stronger. Mr. Simmons started to take notice, encouraging him to submit his essays to the state student writing competition. Noah hesitated, unsure if his words could carry far enough to be heard in a world that didn't listen to people like him. But he submitted them anyway. Then, one morning, as the spring semester rolled in, the school intercom crackled with an announcement. Mr. Simmons' voice filled the air. "Congratulations to our very own Noah Bennett, winner of the State Writing Award for Outstanding Communication." For a few seconds, the halls fell silent. Then came the murmurs, the disbelief, the realization that the deaf kid had outwritten them all. But with recognition came resentment. Chase and his friends weren't about to let the spotlight stay on Noah for long. That afternoon, they found him in the hallway. They didn't touch him this time. They just laughed and said he could keep his little trophy, because words didn't matter in the real world. Noah didn't respond. He didn't need to. But deep inside, he made a quiet promise, one that would echo long after graduation. He would prove them wrong. And fate, in its patient cruelty and justice, was already preparing the stage for it. Because what no one knew, not Chase, not the teachers, not even Noah himself, was that the graduation committee was about to choose the class valedictorian. And for the first time in Ridgewood High's history, the name at the top of that list would belong to the boy who had never spoken a word. The announcement came quietly, posted on the bulletin board outside the principal's office, taped among flyers for prom committees and graduation photos. But within minutes, the news spread through Ridgewood High like wildfire. Noah Bennett, the deaf student everyone once mocked, had been nominated for valedictorian. At first, most students thought it was a mistake. How could someone who never spoke, never presented aloud, be chosen as the face of the graduating class? Rumors circulated that it was just a pity nomination, a way for the school to look inclusive. Chase and his circle seized on that idea immediately. They laughed loudly in the cafeteria, making sure Noah could see their smirks even if he couldn't hear the words. They claimed he'd stolen the nomination from students who actually deserved it, like Chase himself, who was second in academic rank. But while others whispered, Noah stayed focused. He didn't need to hear their words to know what they meant. The looks of disbelief, the glares, the subtle pity from teachers, it was all familiar. The difference this time was that Noah didn't bow under it. He had worked for this. Every paper, every test, every late night spent studying with his hearing aids off so he could focus in perfect silence. It all led to this moment. Still, being nominated was one thing. Winning was another. The final decision for valedictorian would come after a committee vote that included faculty, administrators, and senior class representatives. Noah had the grades, the awards, the essays, but many doubted he could represent the class at graduation if he couldn't speak. Mr. Simmons, who had quietly become one of Noah's strongest supporters, advocated for him in every meeting. He argued that communication wasn't just about sound, it was about connection. He reminded the committee of Noah's essay that had won the state award, an essay that had moved judges to tears. But not everyone agreed. Some thought giving the honor to a student who couldn't deliver a speech was impractical, even embarrassing for the school. When Noah learned that the school board might deny him the title because of his disability, something hardened in him. He had spent years being overlooked, underestimated, and humiliated. He wouldn't let them silence him now. That night, he began to work on what would become the most important creation of his life, his graduation speech. Not a written essay, but something visual, something powerful enough to break through the walls of sound that separated him from the rest of the world. He planned to show, not tell. He spent hours researching ways to communicate emotion without voice. Video storytelling, music vibrations, sign language projected on screens. He didn't want sympathy. He wanted to make people feel what it was like to live in silence, to survive it, and to rise above it. Meanwhile, the tension at school grew. Some teachers encouraged him, while others subtly avoided the topic. The students were divided. Some admired Noah for his resilience, others mocked him for trying too hard. Chase, whose ego couldn't tolerate being overshadowed, started a campaign to convince others that Noah's nomination was unfair. He spoke loudly in class, posted online, even hinted that Noah's award essay hadn't been entirely his own. The rumor stung, but Noah refused to retaliate. He poured everything into his project, staying late after school to use the media lab. Mr. Simmons sometimes stayed with him, helping him edit footage or set up the projector. Slowly, the fragments came together, videos of Noah's daily life, the world as he saw it, the blur of mouths moving without meaning, the loneliness of watching laughter but never hearing it, and the quiet beauty of the world when words fell away. The day of the final vote arrived. Noah didn't attend the meeting. He couldn't bear to sit outside and wait. But as the hours dragged on, his heart raced with a silent rhythm of hope and fear. When the results were finally posted online that evening, his mother found him at the kitchen table, still working on his project. She placed a trembling hand on his shoulder, tears in her eyes, and showed him the screen. He had won. Noah Bennett, valedictorian, Ridgewood High Class of 2025. The announcement sent ripples through the entire school. Some students clapped, some rolled their eyes, and some were simply stunned. Chase's reaction was volcanic. He stormed through the halls the next day, calling it joke, insisting he would have been chosen if not for political correctness. But the decision was final. The principal himself confirmed it. Noah had earned it, fair and square. For the first time in his life, Noah felt seen, not for his silence, not for his difference, but for his strength. Yet he knew this was only the beginning. Being named valedictorian meant he would have to deliver the graduation speech, something no one believed he could do. Even the teachers who supported him whispered privately about what the ceremony would look like. The countdown to graduation began. Noah's project, his speech, became his obsession. He wanted to make it perfect, but with each day, the pressure mounted. Students stared at him in the hallways, wondering how he'd pull it off. Chase made sure everyone knew that if Noah failed to impress, it would be the most awkward graduation ever. A week before graduation, Noah's laptop crashed. His video files were corrupted, his edits lost. For hours he sat motionless, staring at the blank screen, his heart sinking deeper with every passing second. It felt like the universe itself was trying to silence him one last time. But just when despair began to consume him, an email arrived from Mr. Simmons. Attached was a backup copy of the project. The teacher had secretly saved it in case something went wrong. Along with it was a short note that read, "The world may never learn to listen, Noah. So make them watch." Noah's determination reignited. He worked through every night leading up to the ceremony, perfecting every frame, every transition. What he was creating wasn't just a speech. It was his story, his soul in motion. Graduation morning arrived. The auditorium buzzed with excitement. Parents, teachers, and students filled the seats. Noah stood backstage wearing his cap and gown, clutching a small USB drive. His entire life contained within it. His heart pounded. This was his moment. The principal began introducing the valedictorian. Noah could feel the skepticism in the air. People wondering what he would do, if he would even attempt to speak. Chase sat in the front row, a smirk on his face, waiting for failure. As Noah stepped onto the stage, the room fell eerily quiet. He looked out over the sea of faces, some curious, some doubtful, some hopeful. He plugged in the drive, nodded to the technician, and took a deep breath. The lights dimmed. The screen behind him flickered to life. The first image appeared, and within seconds, every mocking word, every cruel whisper, every ounce of prejudice Noah had endured was about to turn into something unforgettable. When the lights dimmed and the screen glowed to life behind Noah, the audience shifted uneasily in their seats. The silence in the auditorium was heavy, the kind of silence that came not from attention, but from doubt. They expected awkwardness, maybe pity, perhaps even discomfort. No one expected what they were about to see. The video opened with a scene of a classroom, the sound faint, the voices muffled. Subtitles appeared across the bottom of the screen, translating the laughter of unseen students. The camera panned to a young Noah, sitting at his desk, his hearing aids visible, his eyes fixed on his notebook while others whispered behind him. The subtitles continued. Hay can't even hear himself talk. The audience shifted again. Some of the teachers lowered their eyes, recognizing their own classrooms, their own indifference. The video cut to a montage, moments of isolation, cafeteria tables where Noah sat alone, group projects where he was ignored, hands raised in class only to be passed over again and again. Then, the sound vanished entirely. The room filled with the pure, heavy silence that had defined Noah's world. For 30 full seconds, the screen showed only his eyes, a close-up of him looking directly into the lens. It was haunting. Every person in the audience could feel it, the weight of being unseen, unheard, forgotten. Then came the music, low, soft vibrations that seemed to tremble through the floor rather than through the air. On screen, Noah appeared again, older now, working late at night, writing, reading, practicing sign language. Images of textbooks, essays marked with A's, trophies from competitions flashed by. Each scene told a wordless story of perseverance. Subtitles appeared again. You told me I couldn't speak. So I learned to tell my story another way. Gasps rippled through the auditorium. As the video continued, Noah's message grew more powerful. He showed the quiet triumphs. The night spent studying while the rest of the world slept, the awards he'd won, the teachers who finally believed in him. There were moments of light, friends who learned sign language to talk to him, a teacher's hand on his shoulder after he won the essay competition. Then came the turning point. The words on screen read, "Being deaf isn't silence. It's learning to listen differently." The music swelled. Images of nature filled the screen, wind blowing through trees, waves crashing on a beach, birds soaring across the sky. There was no sound, but somehow the silence itself felt alive. The audience could feel the rhythm of it, the beauty in stillness, the meaning in quiet. Finally, the last scene appeared, Noah standing in front of the school building, signing words slowly as subtitles appeared beneath him. "I am not broken. I am not less. I am just different. And that difference taught me to see the world in ways others can't. Thank you for finally hearing me." The video faded to black. For several long moments, the room remained completely still. Not a cough, not a whisper, just stunned, breathless silence. And then, like a spark igniting a fire, someone in the audience began to clap. The sound grew louder, spreading across the room until the entire auditorium was on its feet, applauding, cheering, crying. Parents wiped their tears, teachers looked ashamed and proud all at once, and students who had once mocked him shouted his name. Noah stood on stage, not smiling, not crying, just standing tall, his eyes scanning the crowd. He didn't need to hear the applause. He could see it. He could feel it in the vibration of the floor, the movement of hands, the light in people's faces. For the first time, he didn't feel like an outsider. He felt understood. Even Chase, who had sat in the front row, found himself unable to move. His smirk had long faded. His face was pale, his jaw tight. Every word of Noah's message, every image of cruelty and strength, had struck him like a mirror reflecting his own actions. For years, he'd built his identity on being better than others, louder, more confident. But as he watched Noah command a room without uttering a single sound, he realized how small he truly was. When the applause finally died down, Noah bowed his head slightly and stepped back. The principal walked on stage, her eyes glistening with pride. She gestured for Noah to stay beside her as she turned to the audience, but Noah simply shook his head gently, handing her the USB drive. His message was complete. Nothing more needed to be said. After the ceremony, the crowd swarmed around him. Parents, students, teachers, all wanting to shake his hand, to sign, "Thank you," to tell him how powerful his story had been. Some admitted that they had never really thought about what life was like for someone who couldn't hear. Some said they were ashamed they hadn't done more. Noah accepted it all quietly. It wasn't revenge he wanted. It was understanding. And in that moment, he finally felt it. But not everyone could celebrate so easily. That night, after the ceremony, Chase sat alone in his car, the sound of the video still replaying in his mind. He couldn't shake the image of Noah staring into the camera, that unwavering gaze that said everything words couldn't. For the first time, Chase felt something he didn't expect, guilt. And yet, fate wasn't finished with either of them. The next morning, as the school buzzed with talk of Noah's speech, local news already picking up the story, Chase received a message that would shift everything once again. His father's company, a small tech firm that had promised him a summer internship, had just partnered with a new accessibility consultant for an upcoming project. The name on the memo stopped him cold. Noah Bennett. It couldn't be. Chase's world spun. The very person he'd mocked, humiliated, and written off as weak would now be working directly with his father. And, by extension, with him. He thought it was some cruel joke at first, but as he scrolled through the email, the truth hit him like a wave. Noah had been recruited to help the company design inclusive software for the hearing impaired, a field Chase knew nothing about but would now have to assist in. Panic and dread began to mix with the lingering guilt. Chase tried to imagine how Noah would treat him now, after everything. He wondered if this was karma finally arriving, silent, steady, and unavoidable. Meanwhile, Noah had no idea yet. As he packed away his graduation cap and awards, his mother showed him the same article, the offer from a major tech company to consult on accessibility design. He was elated, humbled, and ready to start his next chapter. He saw it as an opportunity to make a difference, to help others like him. But destiny had other plans. In less than a week, Noah would walk into his new workplace. Confident, hopeful, and unaware that waiting on the other side of the conference room door was the same boy who had once laughed at him for being different. The morning sun filtered through the glass facade of the sleek office building, reflecting off polished floors and humming with quiet ambition. Noah stood at the entrance, clutching his folder of documents, a soft smile crossing his face. It was his first day as an accessibility consultant, a milestone he had dreamed of for years. The world, once too loud for him to understand, now felt open in its silence. He could feel the faint vibrations of the revolving door as he pushed through, the thrum of footsteps around him, the subtle air of whispered conversations. It was a new world, one built on professionalism, technology, and opportunity. He had no idea that among those walls, karma was quietly waiting for its cue. Upstairs, in one of the glass-walled meeting rooms, Chase was fidgeting. He had barely slept the night before. His father, proud and unaware of his son's past, had told him to help onboard the new consultant. Brilliant young man who had overcome challenges most couldn't imagine. Chase's stomach had twisted the moment he heard the name, Noah Bennett. He had tried to convince himself that maybe it wasn't that Noah. Maybe it was a coincidence. Another person with the same name. But deep down he knew. The timing, the story, the description, it all matched. The same Noah he had mocked in high school. The same boy who had stood in front of hundreds and turned his pain into power. And now, that same boy was about to walk into his office. When the elevator doors opened, time seemed to slow. Noah stepped out, carrying himself with quiet confidence. His eyes were calm, steady, the same eyes Chase remembered, though there was something different now. Strength, peace. Chase froze in his seat. His mouth went dry as his manager introduced them. Noah offered a polite nod, extending his hand. He didn't seem angry or vengeful or even surprised. His composure was unnerving. It was as if the past didn't exist, or perhaps as if it no longer mattered to him. Chase, however, couldn't escape it. Every word the manager said blurred into background noise. His mind raced back to the years of cruel laughter, whispered jokes, thrown notes, and mocking gestures. He wanted to apologize, but the words lodged in his throat, heavy with shame. Noah, on the other hand, felt something entirely different. When he recognized Chase, a faint ache passed through him like the echo of an old wound. But instead of anger, he felt pity, not for himself, but for the boy who had once needed to hurt others to feel seen. He decided, then and there, that he wouldn't let Chase take up space in his new chapter. Their work together began awkwardly. Chase avoided eye contact, stumbling through explanations, his usual confidence replaced with unease. Noah focused entirely on the project, communicating through written notes, sign language interpreters, and assistive software. He carried himself with professionalism that silenced any doubts. Over the next few days, it became impossible for Chase to ignore Noah's brilliance. He watched as Noah presented innovative ideas, designing features that allowed sound-based systems to be fully navigable through visual and tactile cues. His approach was meticulous, empathetic, human-centered. The rest of the team admired him immediately, but admiration quickly gave way to guilt. Every time someone praised Noah's intelligence or resilience, Chase felt a sting of regret. He remembered the boy he had tried to break and how that same boy now stood before him, shaping technology that would help thousands. One afternoon, during a project review, their manager assigned Chase to assist Noah in testing a prototype. It required them to spend hours side by side, working through feedback and adjustments. The silence between them was thick, filled with unspoken words and memories neither could ignore. For Noah, it was an act of endurance. He had long since moved past needing to forgive Chase, but being near him reopened faint scars. He could sense the nervous energy in Chase's movements, the way his hands shook slightly, the way his eyes darted away every time Noah looked at him. It wasn't fear of confrontation. It was shame. As the hours passed, Noah realized that this unease was karma. Not revenge, not punishment, but reflection. Chase was finally being forced to see the consequences of his actions, to confront the humanity he had once denied another person. And Noah didn't need to say a word for that realization to burn. Later that week, the team gathered for a presentation. Noah had been asked to demonstrate the new software to senior executives and potential investors. The room was full, dozens of suits, glowing screens, and anticipation. Chase sat in the back, his heart pounding. When Noah took the stage, a hush fell over the room. He began his presentation using sign language, with captions appearing in real time on the screen behind him. His voice interpreter translated his words, but it was Noah's calm, commanding presence that held everyone's attention. He spoke of inclusivity, of creating spaces where everyone could belong, not out of charity, but out of respect. He explained how technology should not only bridge gaps but erase them entirely. The audience was captivated. The executives nodded, taking notes, visibly moved by his clarity and conviction. When the demonstration ended, the room erupted in applause. Noah smiled, bowed his head slightly, and returned to his seat. His eyes flicked briefly toward Chase, who sat frozen, his chest tight with emotion. He realized that Noah had already forgiven him, not through words, but through indifference. Noah didn't need to humiliate him, didn't need to remind him of the past. His success, his peace, his grace. That was the ultimate answer, and that realization broke something open inside Chase. That evening, as everyone left, Chase lingered behind. He watched Noah pack up his things, the quiet rhythm of his movements deliberate and calm. He wanted to say something, anything, but his voice caught in his throat. Instead, he wrote a short message on a notepad and slid it across the table before walking out. Noah picked it up. In shaky handwriting, it said, "I'm sorry for everything." Noah looked at the note for a long time. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He simply folded it neatly, placed it in his folder, and walked out of the room. As he stepped into the night air, he felt a strange sense of closure. Karma had done its work, not through vengeance, but through growth. The boy who had once mocked him now carried the weight of remorse. And Noah, who had once carried the burden of pain, finally felt light enough to let it go. But the story wasn't over yet. A few days later, news spread through the company. The accessibility software had been selected for national implementation, a groundbreaking move that would transform public technology standards. The CEO wanted Noah to lead the project. However, what Noah didn't know was that this success would soon bring back the spotlight, and with it, the attention of the world, including people from his past. Journalists began reaching out, eager to tell the story of the deaf student who rose above his bullies to change the world. And among those watching from the sidelines was Chase, who suddenly found himself at a crossroads. He could stay silent, letting his past hide behind Noah's triumph, or he could face it, publicly, honestly, and risk losing everything. The world has a strange way of rediscovering stories long buried under time. One moment, you're moving quietly through your life, and the next, your past, every wound, every lesson, is suddenly placed under a spotlight. That's what began to happen to Noah. After the success of the accessibility software presentation, word spread rapidly through the company and beyond. Within days, the story of a young deaf consultant revolutionizing inclusive technology became a feature on major tech blogs. Within weeks, journalists began reaching out for interviews. Then came television segments, podcasts, and online articles, each one framing Noah's story as a beacon of resilience and triumph over adversity. Noah didn't chase the fame. In truth, it made him uneasy. He wasn't someone who sought validation through recognition, but he understood the importance of his visibility. Every article about him inspired someone. A young student struggling to fit in, a parent learning sign language for their child, a company realizing it could do better. And that, to him, made it worthwhile. Yet for Chase, every headline cut a little deeper. Every time he saw Noah's face appear online, smiling, confident, surrounded by words like overcoming discrimination and inspiring change, the guilt clawed at him harder. He couldn't read those stories without hearing the echoes of his own laughter from high school. The laughter that had once seemed harmless now reverberated in his mind like a confession he had never made. He avoided social media for days, but it didn't help. His coworkers talked about Noah constantly, unaware of the history between them. "Did you see the article about Noah?" They'd say. "He's incredible." Chase would nod quietly, each compliment like a reminder of how small he had once been. Then one morning, he saw a post that stopped him cold. It was a photo of Noah standing at a university campus, smiling with his old graduation gown draped over his arm. The caption read, "From being bullied for his deafness to giving the graduation speech, and now changing lives through inclusive technology." Chase's breath caught. That speech? He had been there that day. He remembered the look in Noah's eyes, the way the crowd had cheered, the way he'd felt something twist inside him. He had wanted to forget that moment for years, but now it was everywhere. And beneath that post was a flood of comments. Thousands of people praising Noah, condemning those who had mistreated him, calling out the cruelty of bullies who never understood the damage they caused. Chase scrolled through them with trembling hands. Every comment felt like it was directed at him, even though no one knew his name. That night, he couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, heart pounding, as guilt gnawed at him from every corner of his conscience. He thought about the note he had given Noah. The simple, "I'm sorry," that had felt so inadequate. He thought about how easy it was to hide behind silence, to hope time would erase the things he'd done. But Noah's success had shown him that time doesn't erase truth. It only gives it weight. The next morning, Chase made a decision that would change everything. He logged into his social media account, opened a blank post, and began to write. His hands trembled, but his heart guided him. He wrote about his past, about the boy he had bullied in high school for being different. He described how he had mocked him, isolated him, treated his silence as weakness. He didn't name Noah, but he didn't need to. He admitted everything, owning every cruel word, every shameful moment. He confessed how seeing that same boy, now a man, succeed beyond imagination had forced him to confront the ugliness of his own actions. He ended the post with one line. "If he ever sees this, I want him to know. I am sorry, not just for what I did to him, but for every person who's ever been made to feel small for something that makes them unique." When he hit post, he didn't expect anyone to read it. He just wanted to release the burden that had been suffocating him. But by evening, the confession had gone viral. People shared it across platforms, pairing it with Noah's story. "The bully speaks out." One article read, "A powerful confession that shows the other side of redemption." Some praised Chase for taking accountability, others were harsher, saying apologies don't undo pain. But everyone was talking. About empathy, about change, about how prejudice scars both the victim and the perpetrator. Noah saw the post 2 days later. It was impossible to miss. His coworkers whispered about it, unsure how to bring it up. When he finally sat down and read the words, a deep stillness filled him. He had imagined this moment once, years ago, in the quiet corners of his mind. A world where the people who hurt him finally saw what they had done. But reality was softer than fantasy. It wasn't revenge, it wasn't triumph. It was something much quieter. It was peace. He didn't respond publicly. He didn't reach out. He didn't need to. The confession wasn't for him. It was for Chase's own soul. And Noah, in his heart, had already moved far beyond needing apologies to validate his journey. Still, that week, something unexpected happened. The story of their past, the bullied boy and the remorseful bully, became a symbol of transformation. News outlets picked it up, highlighting not just Noah's success but Chase's courage to face his wrongs. Noah's inbox flooded with messages from students, teachers, and even parents thanking him for being an example of resilience. Others shared their own stories, of forgiveness, of pain, of healing. The world had turned their private history into a public lesson. A few days later, Noah was invited to give a keynote speech at an education conference. The topic, breaking the silence. How empathy can redefine classrooms. When he stepped onto the stage, the applause was thunderous. The same hands that once pointed and laughed in another lifetime were now clapping for him. He took a deep breath, feeling the energy of the crowd. His interpreter stood beside him, ready. But as Noah began signing, the screens behind him displayed his words for everyone to read in real time. He spoke of resilience, of the power of understanding, and of the need to build schools and workplaces where compassion outweighs judgment. He didn't mention names, but every word carried the weight of his story, and the story of countless others. And somewhere in that audience, sitting quietly in the back row, was Chase. He hadn't told anyone he was coming. He didn't want recognition. He just wanted to listen. As Noah finished his speech, the room rose in applause. People stood, clapping, cheering, inspired. Chase remained seated, tears in his eyes. For the first time, he didn't feel guilt. He felt gratitude, for the lesson, for the chance to change, for the man who had unknowingly taught him what humanity truly meant. When Noah stepped off the stage, he briefly caught Chase's face in the crowd. Their eyes met, just for a moment. There was no tension, no bitterness, only quiet acknowledgement. In that fleeting exchange, they both understood. The past had lost its power. But Noah's journey wasn't finished yet. The conference speech would open a new chapter, one that would take his message beyond classrooms and offices, and into the very institutions that had once failed him. The auditorium lights dimmed as the applause faded into a hum that seemed to vibrate through Noah's entire being. Standing backstage, he felt the weight of everything that had brought him to this moment. Every insult, every lonely lunch in the school cafeteria, every sleepless night wondering if the world would ever hear him. Now that world was listening. In the days following the conference, the video of Noah's keynote went viral. Millions watched as he delivered his message through graceful hand movements and unwavering presence. His words, translated on screen, resonated deeply with people across continents. Schools began implementing new inclusion programs, corporations reached out for guidance on accessibility, and parents wrote letters saying his story had inspired their children to embrace kindness. But Noah wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing change. He used the platform he'd gained not to glorify himself, but to shine a light on those who still struggled to be seen and heard. He began working with advocacy groups to bring sign language education into mainstream classrooms. He consulted with companies developing hearing aid technologies. He even launched a scholarship fund for students with disabilities, naming it the Silent Strength Foundation. Every step he took carried the echo of the boy he used to be, the one who once thought silence was a curse. Meanwhile, Chase's life had taken on a quieter rhythm. After his public confession, he found himself at a crossroads. His colleagues treated him differently, not unkindly, but cautiously, as though unsure how to navigate his transformation. He didn't mind. For the first time, he didn't need validation. He spent his time volunteering, mentoring students who had been bullied, and speaking at schools about empathy and accountability. And though he and Noah hadn't spoken directly, the connection between them had evolved into something invisible but profound. A silent respect, a recognition of growth, a shared understanding that pain, when faced with honesty, could be the birthplace of purpose. Months later, Noah received a letter that would take his mission even further. It was from the Department of Education, inviting him to join a national task force focused on accessibility in public schools. They wanted his expertise and his story to help guide new legislation ensuring equal opportunities for students with disabilities. The invitation felt surreal. He remembered being the child who had to fight just to be included in class discussions. Now, he was being asked to change the very system that once failed him. The meeting was held in Washington, inside a vast, echoing chamber filled with policymakers, educators, and advocates. As Noah entered, the room quieted. He stood before them, confident, calm, and ready. His interpreter stood beside him, but Noah's body language alone commanded attention. He began to sign, his movements deliberate and powerful. His story unfolded, not as a tale of suffering but as a testament to perseverance. He spoke of children who were left behind because their teachers lacked the tools or empathy to reach them. He spoke of the importance of representation, accessibility, and listening, truly listening, to those whose voices often went unheard. As his speech ended, the room erupted in applause. But more than applause, there was action. Within months, several states began adopting the recommendations of the task force. Grants were issued for accessibility programs, teacher training, and technology for students with disabilities. Noah's fingerprints were on every line of progress, and somewhere in the background, Chase followed every development. Each headline, each new initiative, filled him with pride, not for himself but for Noah. He realized that what he once mocked was what the world now celebrated. What he once dismissed as weakness had become the foundation of a movement. One quiet afternoon, a handwritten letter arrived at Noah's office. It was from Chase. This time, it wasn't a confession. It was gratitude. He wrote about how Noah's courage had changed his life, how it had given him the strength to confront his past and turn his guilt into purpose. He explained that he had started a local mentorship program for young people struggling with bullying and identity, and he had named it Project Hear Me. Noah read the letter slowly, his heart full. He placed it gently inside his desk drawer, alongside the original apology note Chase had left on his desk months before. 2 pieces of paper, one written in shame, the other in hope. Together, they told a story of growth, forgiveness, and humanity. The following year, the university where Noah once gave his graduation speech invited him back. This time, not as a student, but as the commencement speaker. The moment felt like a circle closing, a return not to the past, but to its redemption. On the day of the ceremony, thousands of students filled the campus lawn. Noah walked up to the podium, the sun warm on his face, the crowd silent in anticipation. His interpreter stood beside him once again, ready to translate his words. But before he began, Noah raised his hand and signed something simple. "Thank you." He looked across the audience, seeing faces of every color, faith, and background. Students wore hearing aids, hijabs, glasses, braces, symbols of difference that now looked like badges of strength. He signed his speech slowly, his movements confident, deliberate, filled with emotion. He spoke about the power of resilience, the courage to forgive, and the importance of using pain as fuel for change. He spoke about the boy who once sat in the back of the classroom, mocked for his silence, and how that silence had become his greatest power. When he finished, the crowd stood as one, clapping, cheering, some even signing our applause with open hands waving in the air. And in that moment, as the noise washed over him, Noah smiled. It was a soundless roar, but to him, it was the loudest, most beautiful sound he had ever felt. After the ceremony, as people gathered to congratulate him, a familiar face approached from the crowd. It was Chase. He looked older, calmer, humbled. He didn't try to speak. He just extended his hand. Noah looked at him for a long moment, then took it. The handshake was simple, but in that instant, it carried the weight of everything they had been, and everything they had become. No words were needed. Forgiveness had already been spoken years ago through actions. As they parted, Noah turned toward the sunset, the golden light wrapping around him like a final curtain on the story of his youth. He had gone from silence to strength, from pain to purpose, from isolation to inspiration. And as the sky turned orange and gold, he realized something profound. Sometimes, the loudest form of justice isn't shouted. It's felt. The world had finally heard him.